I used to believe that weddings were about love, about celebrating two people stepping into a new life together. For years, I imagined the flowers, the music, the moment I'd walk down the aisle with everyone I loved watching. I thought it would be magical, pure. I didn't realize that for my family, weddings were about control. My name is Elena Morgan, and I was raised in a family where appearances mattered more than reality. My parents, Richard and Vivian, were the kind of people who cared deeply about what neighbors whispered, what church members thought, and what distant relatives posted on Facebook. Their version of love was laced with conditions. Look perfect, behave perfect, sacrifice yourself for family image. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in the comments from where are you watching this video. When I got engaged to Daniel Harper, the man who had patiently loved me for 5 years, I thought just for once they'd be proud of me without turning it into a competition. Daniel was kind, successful, and deeply respectful. I thought he'd become part of my family's circle of approval. At first, it seemed like that was true. My mother cried when I showed her the ring. My father clapped Daniel on the shoulder like a proud father-in-law, and my younger sister Chloe squealed, hugging me tightly, saying she couldn't wait to help me plan every detail. For the first time, it felt like we were all united. The wedding planning began quickly. We decided on a summer ceremony in the gardens of the old Whitmore estate, an enchanting venue with ivy-climbing stone arches and a lake that glimmered gold at sunset. It wasn't cheap, but it wasn't beyond reach, especially because my parents promised something I'd never expected. Elena, my mom said one evening, placing her hand over mine at the dining table, your father and I have been saving for years for this day. We've set aside a wedding fund just for you. My breath caught. For me, I whispered, yes, darling, Dad confirmed, sipping his wine. We always knew you'd want something beautiful. It's what you deserve. Tears burned my eyes. I didn't realize how much I'd longed to hear those words, to feel chosen, supported, seen. The next day, Mom handed me a leather-bound folder with neat banking details. The wedding fund had been built slowly, apparently since I was in college. The amount shocked me enough to cover the venue deposit, the catering, and even the photographer I'd dreamed of hiring. For the first time in my life, I felt like my parents were truly investing in me. Chloe, of course, hovered at every appointment. She laughed with me as I tried on gowns, snapped photos of flower arrangements, and offered her opinion on every decision. Sometimes she overstepped, like insisting on giving input about my first dance song, but I brushed it aside. She was my sister. She'd been through tough breakups, and part of me wanted to believe this was her way of living vicariously through me. Daniel noticed it though. She's a little too involved, don't you think? He asked one night as we lay in bed, the glow of my laptop illuminating the wedding spreadsheet on my screen. She's just excited, I replied, though deep down, a sliver of a knee scratched at my chest. The weeks slipped by in a haze of planning. The venue was booked, the florist secured. I paid deposits with money transferred directly from the wedding fund account my parents managed. Every time I signed a receipt, I whispered gratitude in my heart. Finally, after years of putting Chloe first, they were putting me first. Or so I thought. One chilly evening in March, I visited my parents' house to review the guest list. Chloe was sprawled on the couch, scrolling on her phone, while Mom fussed with her endless sticky notes. Dad was in his study, muttering about budget spreadsheets. Elena, Mom said suddenly, about the wedding fund, we'll need to handle some of the larger payments ourselves, just easier for bookkeeping. Okay, I said easily, as long as it's all accounted for. Her smile faltered for a second. But then she nodded. Of course, darling. I brushed off the flicker of doubt. That night, Chloe followed me to my car. She tugged at her coat sleeves nervously before blurting out, you don't mind if I help with the bachelorette party, do you? Like, plan it entirely. Mom said it might be better if I took control. I hesitated. Well, I was hoping Sarah, my maid of honor, would handle it. Chloe's smile thinned. Sure, whatever you want. The conversation unsettled me, but I told myself I was overreacting. In the weeks that followed, strange things began happening. The venue manager emailed me about delays in confirming payments. The florist left me a voicemail saying she hadn't received the deposit. Even the photographer, my dream photographer, hinted gently that without a cleared payment, he couldn't hold the date much longer. I panicked. Each time, I called my mom. She soothed me with words like, banking delays, darling, and don't worry, your father will sort it out. But the unease grew heavier, like a stone lodged in my chest. Then, one Sunday afternoon, everything shifted. Daniel and I were at the mall when he suggested we stop at the jewelry counter to look at wedding bands. As we admired the gold rings, I glanced across the aisle and froze. Chloe stood at another counter, beaming as she handed a gleaming platinum credit card to the clerk. Shopping bags already dangled from her arm, designer shoes, luxury cosmetics, and what looked like a gown bag. My pulse quickened. Chloe never had that kind of money. She'd been between jobs for months. She lived in our parents' house. Daniel, I whispered, my throat tightening. Where do you think she got that card? He frowned. I don't know, but it doesn't look like she's struggling. I couldn't shake the dread curling in my stomach. I excused myself and followed Chloe at a distance as she drifted from store to store. Every purchase was grand. Every swipe of that card was careless. That night, lying awake in bed, the thought hit me with brutal clarity. The wedding fund. She was spending my wedding fund. I wanted to be wrong. I wanted to believe that Chloe had come into money some other way. Maybe a secret job. Maybe a windfall. Maybe some miracle. But in my heart, I knew the only account that could fund her spree was mine. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house. I walked straight into Dad's study where the folder with the banking details was supposed to be. The drawer was empty. My stomach twisted as I checked the shelves. No folder, no statements, no evidence. Mom appeared at the doorway with her polite but icy smile. Elena, darling, what are you looking for? The folder? I said flatly. The one with the wedding fund statements. Her lips curved tighter. Oh, your father moved some of the papers. Don't worry about those details. You don't need to stress. Don't need to stress, I repeated, my voice shaking. Mom, the vendors are calling me. The payments aren't clearing. And Chloe, she's walking around with a platinum card. For a split second, I saw guilt flash across her face. But it vanished quickly, replaced by irritation. You're imagining things, Elena, she said sharply. Chloe helps with errands. Sometimes she uses our cards. I stared at her. Our cards, or my fund, before she could answer. Chloe breezed in wearing a new silk blouse, her hair freshly styled. She plopped onto the couch with a smug grin. Don't be so paranoid, sis, she drawled, waving her phone. You always overthink. Daniel's words from weeks ago echoed in my ears. She's a little too involved, don't you think? I wanted to scream, but instead I walked out before my rage erupted. That night, I told Daniel everything. His jaw tightened, his hands clenching into fists. Elena, he said, firmly, you need proof. We can't confront them until we're sure. He was right. I spent the next 3 days combing through emails, bank notifications, and old receipts, and then buried in my inbox, I found a digital copy of a transfer confirmation. Thousands moved out of the wedding fund and into an account under my parents' joint names. Days later, more transfers, each one feeding into another account tied to Chloe. My chest burned with betrayal. They hadn't just skimmed, they were draining it. I printed everything and tucked it into a folder of my own. This time, I wasn't going to let them hide the evidence. The next Sunday, we gathered for dinner at my parents' house. The table was set elegantly, roasted chicken, crystal glasses, the good silverware. Chloe strutted in wearing a brand new dress that still had a boutique tag dangling from the hem. She didn't even bother to hide it. I waited until plates were filled and conversation lulled. Then I placed my folder in the center of the table with trembling hands. We need to talk, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. My parents glanced at one another. Chloe rolled her eyes. About what? She sneered. The wedding fund, I said, sliding the papers across the table. Transfers, bank records, receipts. Explain this. The silence that followed was heavy. My father cleared his throat. Elena, sometimes money needs to be redirected, he muttered. We'll replenish it later. Replenish, I repeated, my stomach twisting. This was my wedding, my future, and you gave it to Chloe. Chloe shrugged. Come on, Elena, she said, her tone dripping with false innocence. You weren't using it all at once. I needed help. You needed help, I whispered, with designer shoes, spa packages, luxury handbags. That's help. Her smirk faltered for a second, but she lifted her chin. You'll get married either way. What's the big deal? My voice cracked. The big deal is that I trusted you. I trusted all of you. My mother's expression hardened. Stop being dramatic. Elena, family sacrifices for each other, and right now, Chloe needed support more than you. Her words cut deeper than any blade. Support more than me. My wedding, the one day I'd dreamed of since childhood, was being treated like a luxury they could strip from me without hesitation. Daniel, who had been silent until now, slammed his hand against the table. "This is theft," he said coldly. "You promised Elena this fund, and you've stolen it." My father bristled. "Watch your tone, young man. This is family business." Daniel's jaw clenched. "Family business doesn't mean exploiting your daughter." The air in the room thickened with tension, but my parents sat unmoved, and Chloe smirked like a cat who'd gotten the cream. My heart felt like it was splintering into shards. I couldn't even breathe properly. Everything I'd believed about loyalty, about love, about family, it all shattered in that dining room. I gathered the papers back into my folder, my hands trembling. "Fine," I whispered, "if that's how you want it. But don't expect me to stay silent." My father's voice thundered. "Don't you dare embarrass this family, Elena. Think of how it will look." I laughed bitterly through my tears. Think of how it will look, as if they hadn't already humiliated me, stripped me, betrayed me. I stood, my chair scraping across the hardwood floor. Daniel followed quickly, his hand gripping mine tightly. We walked out without looking. Back in the car, the tears finally came. Hot, relentless, unstoppable. Daniel pulled me into his arms, whispering, "We'll fix this, Elena. We'll make them regret it." I buried my face in his chest, and for the first time, revenge began to burn quietly in my heart. It was no longer about just the wedding. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my future, my worth. They thought they'd stolen from me, but they had given me something far greater, a reason to fight back. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind replayed the dinner like a broken record. Their smug faces, their dismissive words, their cold betrayal. It was all carved into my memory, and I realized something I had never admitted before. My family never truly saw me, not as a daughter, not as a person with dreams. They only saw what they could take, and now they had taken too much. They had crossed a line I couldn't allow them to erase. Daniel sat beside me on the couch, his hand covering mine. "We'll get it back," he said with certainty, but I shook my head. "It's not just about the money anymore, Daniel. It's about respect. It's about showing them I won't be their pawn." He studied me with quiet intensity, then his lips curved into a determined smile. "Then let's fight, Elena. Let's show them you're not the girl they can walk over anymore." His faith lit something inside me. For the first time in days, I felt a spark of power return, and with it, a plan began to form. The next morning, I went to the bank. I requested the complete transaction history of the wedding fund. The clerk hesitated, but when I showed my ID and the account papers, she complied. The list was long, stretching pages, each transfer, each luxury purchase, each theft in black and white. I made copies, one set for me, one for Daniel, one to keep safe with a lawyer. I wasn't going to let them bury this evidence again. This time, I was going to use it. This time, I was going to hold them accountable. As I walked out of the bank, I spotted Chloe across the street. She was laughing with a friend, carrying shopping bags with designer logos. She looked carefree, invincible, but I clenched my folder tighter. Her freedom was built on my sacrifice, and I was done bleeding for her. That evening, Daniel and I met with a wedding planner friend of his. I told her everything, every stolen dollar, every betrayal. She shook her head in disbelief. "Elena, you can't let this slide," she said. "If they've taken your fund, they've committed fraud." Her words echoed in me. Fraud, not just betrayal, but a crime. And suddenly, the idea of revenge no longer felt petty. It felt like justice. Still, part of me hesitated. Dragging my family's name through the mud would mean burning every bridge. But hadn't they already burned them for me? When they chose Chloe over me, when they stripped my dream bare, what bridge was left to protect? I spent days preparing quietly, printing documents, recording Chloe's careless boasts on phone calls, even catching my mother on tape admitting that they had redirected my wedding fund. Every piece was a puzzle falling into place. And soon, the picture was undeniable. Daniel stood by me every step. When I faltered, he reminded me, "They hurt you, Elena. They chose greed over love. You owe them nothing." And hearing him say it made me stronger. One night, as I scrolled through Chloe's social media, I found the final straw. She had posted a picture of herself in a bridal boutique, captioned, "A girl deserves the best, don't you think?" My hands shook as I read the comments, her friends gushing, strangers admiring, and there it was, my fund parading as her fairy tale. I slammed my laptop shut. No more waiting, no more hesitating. I was going to act. The next day, I requested a formal meeting with my parents. I told them it was urgent. They agreed reluctantly, probably assuming I'd come to apologize. But when I walked into their house with Daniel at my side and a thick folder of evidence, they weren't smiling anymore. We sat in the living room, the air stiff with tension. I placed the documents on the coffee table. "Here's the full record," I said, my voice steady. "Every cent you stole, every transaction you tried to hide." My father's face flushed red. "Where did you get this?" he barked. But my mother's lips tightened. She knew exactly how. And Chloe, sitting smugly on the couch, paled for the first time. I leaned forward. "You can deny it all you want, but this is proof. You didn't just betray me, you committed fraud, and I have more than enough to take this to court." Silence crashed over the room. My father's fists clenched. My mother's voice shook as she snapped. "You wouldn't dare, Elena. You'd ruin this family." I laughed bitterly. This family ruined me, and now I'm ready to fight back. Daniel placed his hand on mine, grounding me. "We're giving you one chance," he said firmly. "Return the money, every cent, and apologize, or face the consequences." My parents exchanged frantic glances, but Chloe scoffed. "She won't do it. She doesn't have the guts." I turned to her slowly. My voice was calm but sharp as glass. "You stole my dream, Chloe, but you underestimated me, and I promise you, I won't stop until the world knows what you did." For the first time, her smirk faltered. Fear flickered across her perfect face, and in that moment, I knew I had shifted the power. The girl they used to silence was now the one holding the knife. As Daniel and I walked out of that house, the sun was setting, the sky painted with streaks of fire, and for the first time in weeks, I felt free. Revenge wasn't just an idea anymore. It was already in motion. I didn't know exactly what the next days would bring, but I knew one thing for certain. They thought they could steal my future, but I was going to steal back my power, and this war was only beginning. I woke up the next morning with a strange calm inside me. The storm that had been raging in my chest for weeks had settled, because now I had direction. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was the architect of their downfall, and I was ready. Daniel brewed coffee in the kitchen while I spread the evidence across the table. The bank statements, the recordings, the screenshots of Chloe's social media. It was all there, organized and undeniable. Each piece felt like a weapon, and today, I was going to use them. We started with a lawyer. She looked over the documents carefully. Her brows lifted higher and higher as she read. When she finally spoke, her tone was grave. "Elena, you have a very strong case here." My chest tightened. A strong case. Those words made my knees weak, because for so long, I felt powerless. But here was proof that justice wasn't just a dream. The lawyer leaned forward. "We can file for restitution. We can expose them publicly. But you need to understand something. This will destroy your family's reputation. Are you ready for that?" I closed my eyes for a moment. The faces of my parents flickered in my mind. Their indifference, their cruelty, their betrayal, and then Chloe's smirk, so sure of her victory. My eyes opened with fire. "I'm not the one who destroyed this family," I whispered. "They did, and now they'll live with the consequences." We left the office with papers in hand, my heart pounding. Every step felt like marching toward war. But instead of fear, I carried a quiet determination. I was no longer the Elena they thought they could silence. That evening, I sent copies of the documents to my parents. I attached a single note. "You have 48 hours to return everything or face exposure." Daniel and I waited together. Hours passed, then a full day. No response. On the second day, Chloe finally called. Her voice dripped with venom. "You think you're clever, don't you, Elena? But no one's going to believe you. You've always been the bitter sister, jealous of me." I let her rant. Her words no longer cut like they once did. When she paused, I said calmly, "Chloe, the difference between jealousy and justice is proof, and I have all of it." There was a sharp inhale on the other end. Then she hung up. I stared at my phone, and I knew then that the war was real. They weren't going to give in. The deadline came and went. No money, no apology, nothing. So I did what I had promised. I went public. With Daniel by my side, we posted everything. The bank records, the recordings, the screenshots. Not on social media first, but directly to the wedding community forums, to blogs that wrote about relationships, to people who would understand the betrayal of family. And like wildfire, it spread. Strangers commented in outrage. Friends reached out in disbelief. Even extended family I hadn't spoken to in years messaged me, some with sympathy, others with anger at my parents. My phone buzzed endlessly, but one message stopped me cold. It was from my aunt. She wrote, "Elena, I knew something like this would happen. I tried to warn your mother years ago." My hands trembled as I typed back, "What do you mean?" Her reply came quickly, "Ask your father about the inheritance." My chest tightened. Inheritance? The word struck like thunder. I confronted Daniel that night. "Do you think they've done this before?" I asked. He nodded grimly. People who steal once usually have a history. And suddenly, it all made sense. My family's sudden upgrades in lifestyle, the vacations, the way Chloe always had more. It wasn't just my wedding fund they had stolen. It was bigger, deeper, and darker. The next day, I returned to the lawyer. I told her about my aunt's message. She dug into records, and what she found shattered what little was left of my heart. Years ago, my grandfather had left a trust. It was meant to be divided equally between Chloe and me. But somehow, mysteriously, my share had never reached me. It had been signed over by my parents, and Chloe had taken it all. My stomach dropped. My whole life, I thought I was just unlucky, that maybe Chloe was favored. But at least things were fair behind the scenes. But no, they had been robbing me for years. I walked out of that office in silence. The city lights blurred through my tears, and for the first time, I understood. This wasn't about one wedding. This was about a lifetime of betrayal. When I reached home, Daniel wrapped me in his arms. I couldn't even speak, but he whispered, "Elena, you have the power now, and you can decide how this story ends." I stayed awake through the night, staring at the evidence. I thought about revenge, about lawsuits, about taking everything back. But I also thought about myself, about the woman I wanted to be, and the life I wanted to live. By dawn, I made my choice. I didn't call my parents. I didn't call Chloe. Instead, I called the lawyer. File everything I said, every lawsuit, every claim, every charge. It was time. Time to end this cycle. Not with screaming, not with begging, but with cold, unshakable justice, and with freedom. The weeks that followed were brutal. My parents tried to deny. Chloe tried to smear me online. But the documents spoke louder than their lies. The courts sided with me, and slowly, piece by piece, the empire of deceit they had built crumbled. When the verdict was read, Chloe stormed out of the courtroom. My mother wept silently. My father refused to meet my eyes, and I sat there, hands shaking, knowing I had finally won. But the twist came weeks later. I received a letter in the mail. It was from Chloe. The envelope was thin, but inside was a single photograph, a picture of me as a child, standing beside her, both of us smiling. On the back, she had scrawled messy words, "You think you won, but you'll always be alone now." My breath caught, because in her own cruel way, she was right. I had reclaimed my money, my dignity, my future, but the cost was blood. The cost was family. And as I set the photo down, tears blurred my vision. I realized that revenge had freed me, but it had also broken something I could never repair. I turned to Daniel. He held my face in his hands and whispered, "You're not alone, Elena, not anymore." And in his arms, I understood the real ending. My family may have stolen my past, but they couldn't steal my tomorrow. And this was my revenge, not just reclaiming money or dignity, but building a life they could never touch again. And with that, I closed the chapter. A chapter written in betrayal, blood, and loss, but ending in strength, truth, and love. And though the scars would remain, I knew I had finally won.